My daughter's boyfriend had been draining her inheritance for 6 months before she finally slipped me a note across the Thanksgiving table. He'd already convinced her to move $400,000 out of the trust her mother left her. He thought he was sitting down to a holiday dinner. He had no idea he was sitting down with a man who spent 31 years hunting people exactly like him. Before I go any further, subscribe to the channel and drop a comment telling me what time it is, where you are right now. I read every single one. My name is Walter Greer. I'm 64 years old, and I live alone in the same house in Knoxville, Tennessee, where I raised my 2 children. My wife, Carol Ann, passed from ovarian cancer 6 years ago. She was 57. She was the kind of woman who remembered every birthday, kept handwritten recipe cards in a wooden box on the counter, and made our house smell like something worth coming home to. When she died, she left behind a trust fund for our daughter $480,000 that Carol Ann had saved and invested quietly over 25 years, a little at a time, without ever saying a word about it to anyone except me. She called it her daughter's soft landing. Whatever life throws at her, she told me the night she signed the documents, at least she'll have somewhere to land. I retired from the IRS Criminal Investigation Division 3 years ago. 31 years tracking financial crimes, money laundering, tax fraud, asset concealment. I've sat across interrogation tables from people who thought they were untouchable. Doctors, attorneys, city commissioners, a state senator once. The crimes change, the faces change. The tells never do. People who steal money all carry the same energy, a particular kind of confidence that sits just slightly too high in the room, like they're already spending what they haven't taken yet. My daughter is 31. She's a kindergarten teacher in Nashville, and she is the most genuinely good person I have ever known. She calls me every Sunday. She still makes her mother's cornbread recipe at Christmas. She cried at the end of every school year because she was going to miss her students. She is not the kind of person who sees it coming. She started dating her boyfriend in the spring. She brought him to my house for the 4th of July cookout. And I'll be honest, my first impression was vague unease. The kind that doesn't announce itself loudly, just sits in the back of your mind and waits. He was good-looking in a rehearsed kind of way. Mid-30s, sharp dresser, quick with compliments. He had a handshake that was slightly too firm, the way men shake hands when they want to establish something. He said he was in real estate development. When I asked him which projects, he gave me the name of a company I'd never heard of and pivoted immediately to asking about my retirement. I filed it. That's what I do. I don't react. I file. By Labor Day, my daughter mentioned he had moved into her apartment. By October, she told me he had introduced her to his mother, a woman named Diane, who lived in Atlanta and apparently had opinions about everything. My daughter described her as intense. She said it like it was a personality quirk. I heard it differently. Thanksgiving this year was at my house. That was the plan every year, my daughter and my son driving in from Nashville, bringing food, filling the house with noise again. My son is 34, works in logistics, practical and steady. My daughter's boyfriend was joining us for the first time at a family holiday, and he brought his mother. She arrived wearing a silk blouse and carrying a store-bought pie she'd placed in a bakery box to look homemade. I noticed because I noticed things. She kissed my daughter on both cheeks like a European aunt and called my home charming in a tone that meant the opposite. Her son watched her work the room and smiled at appropriate moments, the way someone smiles when they've seen a performance so many times they've memorized the cues. Dinner was fine on the surface. My son kept the conversation moving. My daughter cooked the turkey, and it was perfect, same as always. The boyfriend talked about a development project in Chattanooga, luxury condominiums, ground floor retail, the kind of pitch that sounds impressive to someone who doesn't know that half of all boutique development companies are incorporated on a Tuesday and dissolved by Thursday. His mother leaned forward at one point and touched my daughter's hand. "Your mother would be so proud of who you've become," she said. I watched my daughter's face soften. It was a skilled move. Invoke the dead mother. Create emotional debt. I have seen it in depositions. I said nothing. I poured myself more water and listened. It was during the second pass of the sweet potato casserole that I felt something brush my forearm. My daughter's hand, casual and quick, pressing a folded piece of paper against my sleeve. I palmed it the way you learn to receive things when you've spent years working around people who watch hands. His mother was telling a story about a Thanksgiving in Savannah. Nobody was looking at me. I kept my expression neutral and unfolded the note in my lap without glancing down, running my thumb along the crease the way a man reads a document in the dark. My daughter had pressed hard. I could feel the indentations of every word before I read them. Dad, he had me sign documents last week. I don't know what they were. Something about the trust. I'm scared. Please don't say anything yet. Just help me. I refolded the paper, placed it in my shirt pocket, picked up my fork and finished my sweet potato casserole. His mother was still talking about Savannah. I smiled and nodded at something she said. Inside, I was very still. The stillness I learned in 31 years of watching people lie to my face, not the stillness of someone who doesn't care, but the stillness of someone who has already started building the case. After dessert, I asked my daughter to help me with dishes. We stood at the kitchen sink while laughter came from the living room, and she spoke quietly with her back half turned to the doorway. She told me it started in September. He had explained that his Chattanooga project needed a capital infusion, a bridge loan, he called it, while the bank financing was finalizing. He said it was standard in development. He said the trust was just sitting there not working hard enough. He said her mother would have wanted it to grow. She told me she had wired $400,000 to an account he gave her. I kept washing the same dish for about 30 seconds longer than necessary. What about the documents last week? I asked. He said they were assignment agreements. Said her remaining trust balance, $80,000, was being repositioned to a different vehicle. His business attorney handled it. She hadn't read all of them. He'd told her it was routine. I set the dish in the rack. I turned off the water. Did you get copies? I asked. He said he'd send them to her. He hadn't yet. I looked at my daughter. She looked the way my son had looked at age 9 when he came to me after he'd accidentally broken a neighbor's fence and had been carrying the secret for 3 days alone. Not guilty. Exactly. Relieved. Terrified of what I'd say, but more terrified of carrying it alone for 1 more hour. I told her she did the right thing. I told her to go back out there and act like this conversation was about pie. I told her I would handle it and she would be fine. She hugged me at the kitchen sink for a long time. I could feel her shaking slightly. When we went back to the living room, her boyfriend was showing my son something on his phone renderings, probably, of the Chattanooga condominiums that existed nowhere except a design software program. His mother was examining one of Carol Ann's photographs on the mantel with the attentive performance of a woman who wanted to seem moved by something. I sat down in my armchair, the one facing the door, and I watched them for the rest of the evening with the same calm attention I used to give a room full of suspects. They left around 9. He hugged my daughter at the door, said it was a wonderful Thanksgiving, said we'd have to do this again at Christmas, maybe at their place. His mother squeezed my hand and told me what a lovely home I kept. My son stayed behind to help stack chairs. He could tell something had shifted. He asked me once, quietly, if everything was okay. Not yet, I told him. But it will be. That night I sat in my study until 2 in the morning. The room still has all my old files from consulting work I've taken on since retirement binders, database printouts, a whiteboard I never took down. I started a new list on a fresh sheet of paper. His full name, Derek Cahill. His company name, Meridian Crest Development, LLC. His mother, Diane Cahill, Atlanta. The wire amount, $400,000. The receiving account, unknown. The document signed last week, unknown content, no copies provided. I called my old partner the next morning. Frank Delgado spent 28 years in IRS criminal investigation with me and now ran a private financial investigations firm out of Charlotte. He answered on the second ring and said my name the way old colleagues do, flat and familiar, no performance. I need background on a real estate developer, I said, and his LLC, deep background. He asked if it was personal. My daughter, I said. He told me he'd call me in 48 hours. While I waited, I contacted my attorney. Robert Shin had handled Carol Ann's estate and the trust documentation. I explained the situation. He asked me to email him the trust documents I had on file from when Carol Ann established it. He would review whether the assignment agreements my daughter had signed were legally valid transfers and whether anything about how they were obtained could constitute undue influence or fraud. Then I called my daughter. I told her she needed to ask her boyfriend for copies of every document she had signed in the past 6 months. She said he would probably ask why. I told her to say she wanted her own records, that her father had suggested it. Keep it simple. Don't argue if he pushes back. Just make the request and let me know what he says. He told her the documents were still with his attorney and would take a few days to process. That was a Wednesday. By Friday, Robert had reviewed the original trust documents and told me that any valid transfer of trust assets required the trustee's written authorization, which in this case was my daughter herself. But the trust had specific language requiring independent legal counsel's signature for transfers exceeding $50,000. Either that language had been waived through documentation my daughter signed without understanding what she was signing, or the transfer was fraudulent on its face. I asked him how long to know for certain. "Give me the wire transfer records," he said, "and I'll tell you by Monday." My daughter pulled her bank records and forwarded them to Robert. The wire had gone to an account under the name Meridian Crest Capital Holdings, not Meridian Crest Development LLC, which was the company name her boyfriend had registered. Two different entities. Frank called me that same evening. He talked for 20 minutes, and I took 4 pages of notes. Meridian Crest Development LLC had been registered in Tennessee 14 months ago. It listed one member, Derek Cahill. No filed annual reports, no active contractor's license, no permits pulled in Chattanooga or anywhere else. The address listed on the registration was a mailbox service in Brentwood. Meridian Crest Capital Holdings was a different entity registered in Georgia 6 months ago. The registered agent was a woman named Diane Cahill. His mother. I stopped writing for a moment. Frank kept going. Derek Cahill had 2 previous LLCs in Georgia, both dissolved within 18 months of registration. One had been the subject of a civil complaint in Fulton County. A woman had sued him for $160,000. She claimed to have invested in a development project that never broke ground. The case had settled out of court, terms sealed. His mother, Diane Cahill, had been listed as a co-respondent in that same complaint. A second complaint, smaller, in Cobb County, similar pattern, investor, development project, money transferred, project abandoned, settlement sealed. I asked Frank if he could get contact information for both plaintiffs. He said he already had it. I called the first woman that same night. She was in her mid-50s, retired teacher, living outside Atlanta. She picked up cautiously. When I explained who I was and why I was calling, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Did she sign transfer documents before she found out?" "Yes," I said. She exhaled slowly. "I did too. I thought I was protecting my children's future." He told me it was a sure thing. He brought his mother to my house for dinner, and she talked about how trustworthy he was, how he was going to make something of himself. I felt the shape of it then, complete and clear. The same architecture as every financial con I had ever worked. 2 operators, one young and charming, one older and authoritative. Identify a target with accessible assets, preferably assets tied to grief and inheritance, a life insurance payout, a retirement account. Build emotional trust quickly. Invoke the dead. Create urgency. Move the money before the target thinks to ask the right questions. They had done this before, refining it each time, and they had walked away clean twice because both victims were too embarrassed or too exhausted to fight. They did not know my daughter had a father who still had active consulting relationships with 3 federal agencies and had never, in 31 years, walked away from a case that was winnable. I called the second plaintiff the following morning. She was younger, early 40s, had lost her husband and been targeted within a year of his death. She had transferred $95,000. She had been humiliated and had told almost no one. When I told her I had documentation of at least 2 other victims and was building toward criminal referral, she started crying. Not sad crying. The specific crying of someone who has been carrying something heavy alone and has just been told they can put it down. "I want to help," she said. "Whatever you need." Robert called me Monday morning with his assessment. The transfer documentation my daughter had signed contained 2 significant problems. First, the independent counsel's signature requirement had been bypassed. There was a waiver clause buried in page 7 of a 9-page document, written in language that obscured its purpose entirely. Second, The receiving account, Meridian Crest Capital Holdings, was not the entity my daughter had been told she was investing in. The transfer had been misrepresented at the point of signing. In Robert's opinion, the transfer was fraudulent in its inducement and almost certainly reversible if we moved quickly enough. He asked me how quickly I wanted to move. I told him I wanted to see their faces when they found out it was over. My daughter was staying with me through the weekend. I sat with her in the kitchen the Sunday after Thanksgiving and laid out everything Frank and Robert had found. I did it slowly and carefully, the way I used to brief victims before we went into court. I watched her face move through the stages: disbelief, then the sick recognition that the disbelief was wishful thinking, then grief, then something harder underneath. She asked me if she had been stupid. "No," I said. "You were lonely after your mother died. There's a specific kind of loneliness that comes after you lose someone, and there are people in the world who study how to find it and use it. You were targeted by professionals. That is not the same thing as being stupid." She was quiet for a moment. Then she asked what happened next. I told her we were going to invite her boyfriend and his mother to dinner. The invitation came from my daughter, which was important. She texted him that her father wanted to get to know him better, that it would mean a lot to her. He accepted within an hour. His mother confirmed she'd make the drive from Atlanta. They arrived on a Saturday evening. Her boyfriend brought a bottle of wine, the kind with an impressive-looking label. His mother brought flowers that she handed to my daughter with both hands, a gesture meant to read as maternal. I watched my son shake the boyfriend's hand and keep his expression neutral. I had briefed my son the night before. He handled it well. We sat down to dinner. I had cooked pot roast because it takes 4 hours, and I had needed something to do with my hands. The conversation was easy at first. His mother carried it, the way she had at Thanksgiving. She had stories about Atlanta, opinions about Nashville, gentle inquiries about my daughter's classroom. The boyfriend complimented the pot roast. He asked my son about his work. He was smooth and warm and careful, the performance of a man who had done this many times and knew exactly how to calibrate it. After the main course, I set down my fork and looked at him directly. "Tell me more about Meridian Crest," I said. He smiled. "Which one? The Development LLC or the capital vehicle?" "The one my daughter wired $400,000 to." The smile stayed in place, but something shifted behind it. His mother's hand, resting on the table, went still. He said the capital holding entity was just a financial structuring instrument, standard in development financing. He said the project was progressing well. "What project?" I asked. "What permits have been pulled in Hamilton County?" He said the entitlement process was ongoing. I opened the folder I had kept under my chair and placed it on the table. Building permit records from Hamilton County, Tennessee. Nothing filed under Meridian Crest or Derek Cahill in the past 18 months. His mother made a sound, not quite a word, just a breath pulled in through the nose. He said there must be a filing error. He said the permits were handled through a general contractor. He said he could get me documentation. "You have 72 hours, I said. "Show me signed contractor agreements, a site plan on record with the county, and an explanation of why the receiving account for my daughter's wire transfer was registered in Georgia under your mother's name." He looked at his mother. She was looking at me. "Richard," she started, then stopped. She had used the wrong name. She collected herself and said, "Walter, I think this has gotten off on the wrong foot. My son has been completely transparent with your daughter." I turned to her. "I understand you were named in a civil complaint in Fulton County in 2021. I understand there was a second complaint in Cobb County in 2022. I understand both settled under sealed terms. I understand both involved development investment schemes with the same structure as the one my daughter was sold." The room went completely quiet. My daughter was looking at her boyfriend. He was looking at the folder on the table with an expression I had seen before. It was the expression of someone who has just realized that the story they've been telling has run out of road. His mother pushed her chair back slightly, a preparation for standing that she probably didn't realize she was making. "You have no idea what you're talking about," her boyfriend said. His voice had changed. The warmth was gone. What was underneath it was flat and hard and revealed. "I have a forensic financial analysis of your 2 LLCs, I said. "I have statements from 2 previous victims who are prepared to testify. I have transfer records showing my daughter's money moved to an entity she was never told existed. I have the trust documents your attorney altered to include a waiver she didn't understand and was never counseled on by independent legal representation. I paused. I spent 31 years as a special agent with IRS Criminal Investigation. I have referred this matter to the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation's Financial Crimes Unit and to the Georgia Attorney General's Consumer Protection Division. I have a civil complaint ready to file Monday morning. I leaned forward. Or, you can return my daughter's $400,000 by wire transfer before noon on Monday. Sign releases, acknowledging the transfers were misrepresented, and leave her life completely and permanently. If you do that, the civil filing waits. The criminal referral waits. If you don't, I submit everything I have to both agencies first thing Monday morning and let it run its course. His mother stood up. This is extortion, she said. You're threatening us. No, I said. I'm offering you the last easy exit you're going to get. He stood too. His face was red in a way that had nothing to do with the pot roast. You think you can just come at us like this? We have attorneys? Good, I said. Have them call Robert Shin. His number is in the folder. They left without their coats. I heard his mother say something to him in a low voice in the driveway, her tone sharp and urgent. The car started. The headlights swept across the kitchen window. My daughter sat at the table looking at the pot roast. My son got up and poured 3 glasses of water and set them down without saying anything. Is it over? My daughter asked. I said, almost. I was wrong about how they'd respond. I expected a lawyer call. Instead, by Sunday morning, my daughter's boyfriend had texted her a message that started with an apology and ended with a threat. He said his family had legal counsel ready to contest the trust transfer as a valid investment agreement. He said my daughter had signed willingly, and he had documentation to prove it. He said if we pursued this, he would countersue for tortious interference and defamation. I forwarded the text to Robert and to the TBI contact I had reached out to on Friday. Robert called within an hour. Let them file, he said. That text alone just demonstrated consciousness of guilt. He's moved from radio silence to pre-litigation threats in under 16 hours. No innocent person does that. My TBI contact, a financial crimes investigator I'd worked alongside on 3 cases during my last years in service, called Sunday evening. He'd reviewed what I'd sent. He told me they had been monitoring a string of similar complaints in the Mid-South over the past 2 years, development investment schemes targeting widows and recently bereaved individuals. The complaints hadn't been connected yet because the LLC names changed each time. What I'd sent him connected them. He asked me how many victims I had documentation on. 3 confirmed, I said. Possibly more. He told me to send everything. That night, I sat at my kitchen table and assembled the package the way I used to assemble case files, chronologically, sourced, cross-referenced. The 2 previous civil complaints, Frank's financial analysis of both LLCs, the transfer records from my daughter's account, the trust documents with the buried waiver clause, the text message from Sunday morning, statements from both previous victims, Robert's legal opinion on the fraudulent transfer. 47 pages. I emailed it to the TBI investigator at 11:48 p.m. He replied at 7:15 the next morning. This is exactly what we needed. My daughter's boyfriend did not return the money by noon Monday. At 12:05, Robert filed the civil complaint in Davidson County. At 2:30 that afternoon, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was an attorney in Nashville. He identified himself as representing Derek Cahill and said his client was prepared to discuss a resolution. Is your client prepared to return $400,000 by end of business today? I asked. We'd need more time than that. You have until 5 o'clock, I said. After that, this is out of my hands. He called back at 4:47. The wire would go out the following morning. His client was requesting a mutual release of all claims. I talked to Robert. We negotiated the terms. Full return of funds. Signed acknowledgement that the transfer had been misrepresented. A no-contact agreement covering my daughter and both previous victims who had agreed to be included, and a signed statement admissible in the criminal proceedings, which were now out of my control entirely. The wire cleared at 10:22 Tuesday morning, $400,000 back in my daughter's trust account. She called me when she saw it. She didn't say anything for a moment. Then she said, "Mom, soft landing." "That's right," I said. The criminal side moved on its own timeline after that. The TBI investigation ran for 11 weeks. By February, the Georgia Attorney General's office had joined, coordinating with Tennessee on the multi-state scheme. Both the boyfriend and his mother were indicted on wire fraud, theft by deception, and organized fraud charges. The Georgia indictment added elder financial exploitation because two of the other victims were over 65. His mother negotiated a plea first, 9 years. She was 62. She would be 71 when she got out. Her son went to trial, which surprised me a little. He had a private attorney and a strategy built on the argument that every investment carries risk and that no one had forced anyone to sign anything. It was a reasonable strategy against a weak case. It collapsed completely when the prosecutor played the text message he'd sent my daughter on Sunday morning, then put all 3 previous victims on the stand in sequence. Same story, same structure, same LLC trick, same mother at the dinner table talking about how trustworthy her son was. The jury was out for 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. 14 years. My daughter was in the courtroom for the verdict. She didn't cry. She sat very still and then exhaled slowly, the way someone breathes out after holding their breath without realizing it. My son drove down for it. He sat on one side of her and I sat on the other, and when the verdict came, he put his arm around her, and she leaned into him the way she used to when they were children and a storm came through at night. Outside the courthouse, one of the previous victims, the retired teacher from outside Atlanta, was waiting on the steps. She had testified and she looked lighter for it, the way people look when they've been carrying something heavy and have finally been allowed to set it down in the right place. She took my hand with both of hers and said, "I never thought anyone would believe me." "I believed you," I said. "The evidence believed you. And 12 people in that jury box believed you." She nodded. Her eyes were bright. Driving home to Knoxville that evening, I thought about Carol Ann, about the wooden recipe box on the counter and the trust documents she had signed quietly and without fanfare because she wanted her daughter to have a soft landing no matter what came. She had not imagined this particular storm, but she had built for it anyway. The way good people prepare for things they hope will never happen. The money was safe. My daughter was safe. 2 people who had built a career out of finding grief-stricken people and taking from them were going to spend the next decade in a federal facility. And the 2 women who had been too embarrassed for too long to tell anyone what had been done to them had finally been heard by a court of law. My daughter called me that Sunday, same as always. We talked for 40 minutes about her students, about a new recipe she was trying, about whether she was going to drive home for Christmas or whether I should come to Nashville. Normal conversation, the kind that fills a house back up. At the end, she said, "I keep thinking about the note I passed you at Thanksgiving. I almost didn't do it. I almost convinced myself I was being paranoid." I said, "You weren't paranoid. You were paying attention. You just needed someone to act on it with you." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I miss Mom." "I know," I said. "I do too, every day." But her soft landing held. The thing about financial fraud is that it almost never looks like what you imagine it looks like. It doesn't arrive with a mask and a demand. It arrives with flowers and a warm handshake, and someone who knows just what to say about your grief. It finds the place where you're trying hardest to believe the world is good, and it stands there and smiles. I spent 31 years chasing it. I know every shape it takes. And the one thing I can tell you, from every case I ever worked, is this. The moment it asks you not to tell anyone, not your father, not your brother, not your friends, that is the moment you pick up the phone. That is exactly the moment you ask for help. My daughter waited longer than she should have, but she passed me that note, and I was at the table. If this story meant something to you, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone you care about. Leave me a comment and tell me where you're watching from. We read every one. Click the box on the left for the next story, and we'll see you there.